Lena's hand shook as she held the lottery ticket, the numbers bold and gleaming in the fluorescent light of the small convenience store. She could hardly breathe. Her chest felt tight, like it was trying to squeeze every bit of hope into one frantic beat. 100 million. The words didn't make sense yet. She had to check 3 times before they sank in. Her mind immediately raced to Mark. He'd been her boyfriend for 7 years. Steady, funny, loving, at least, that's what she had thought. She could already see the smile spreading across his face as she imagined telling him. She imagined celebrating together, maybe even planning their future in ways they'd always joked about: trips, a house of their own, freedom from the tiny anxieties of rent and bills. She called his number before she even reached home, unable to wait. Her voice trembled with excitement. "Mark. You won't believe this." "Slow down, Lena." "What's wrong?" he said. Concern laced his tone, and for a moment she softened. She hadn't meant to startle him. I won. I won the lottery," she exclaimed. There was a pause. A quiet she wasn't expecting. Then, a chuckle, soft at first, almost cautious. "That's amazing," he said. His voice didn't carry the warmth she had imagined. It had shifted, just subtly, like the air before a storm. "How much?" 100 million, Lena whispered, a grin spreading across her face. The pause came again. Longer this time. She could hear him breathe in a way that sounded different, calculating. "Wow," he said finally. And that word didn't feel celebratory anymore. "Wow." Before she could react, he said, can I see it? I mean, the ticket?" His tone sounded casual, but it carried the weight of something she didn't yet recognize. "Sure," she said. And when she handed it over that night, she didn't know she was handing over more than paper. The next hours blurred into a nightmare. Mark's eyes, once familiar and soft, glinted with greed as he took the ticket. He didn't even try to hide the calculation running through his mind: how much he could get if he cashed it first, if he kept her from doing it herself. The trust that had defined their relationship shattered in a single look. Then the violence began. Lena barely had time to react. Mark's hands gripped her arms with a strength she hadn't anticipated. She fell to the floor. Pain exploded as he struck her legs, arms, ribs. Each hit sent her breath away in jagged, sharp bursts. She tried to scream, but his hand clamped over her mouth. Panic and disbelief flooded her chest. "Lena, stop struggling," he muttered. But it wasn't a plea. It was a threat. She realized, horrified, that this wasn't just a moment of rage. This was calculation. She didn't fully understand it yet, but she would. He left her in the basement of their home, bruised, bloody, and broken, a cage of old boxes and a locked door keeping her in. Every sound she heard, the creak of the floorboards, the soft hum of the refrigerator, felt amplified. Each one reminded her that she had been betrayed by the person she had loved most. And then Chloe arrived. Lena's best friend. The one person she had believed would stand by her, who had laughed with her in triumphs and wiped her tears in heartbreak. Chloe's voice was soft at first, coaxing. "Lena?" When Lena's battered eyes finally adjusted to the dim light, she saw Chloe standing there, not shocked, not worried, but smiling. The kind of smile that doesn't mask affection, it exposes something far darker. "She told me," Chloe said, nodding at Mark, who was still standing there, ticket in hand. "About the money." Lena blinked, trying to comprehend. "Chloe, what are you doing?" Chloe laughed then. A sound sharp enough to make Lena's head throb. "I'm here because, well, I've been honest with Mark." She glanced at him. "We've been seeing each other for a while. I guess you could call it," her smile widened. "An affair." Lena's stomach dropped. She pressed herself against the wall, numb, sick, and burning with disbelief. You knew," she whispered. "We did," Mark said, smirking. His eyes glittered like knives. "And we're smarter than you, Lena. Always have been. You win something big, and we take it." Chloe crouched in front of her, eyes glittering with envy, her voice almost a purr. "You've always been better than us. Smarter, luckier, prettier. It's annoying, really. And now, thanks to Mark here, it's all ours." The words sank in slowly. They weren't just mocking her. They weren't just jealous. They were celebrating her destruction. Time blurred. She tried to struggle, to push herself up, but her limbs didn't respond. Pain flooded through her body, each movement agony. They laughed as she crawled toward the basement door, weak and defeated. Hours passed. Days, maybe. She lost track. The pain became a constant companion. Hunger gnawed at her. Her throat burned from thirst. Every attempt to call for help met only with laughter from above. And all the while, the ticket, the bearer of her fortune, her future, her hope, was gone. Mark and Chloe moved with a terrifying casualness. They didn't just steal her money. They stole her life, her trust, and the belief that love could protect her. They began making plans, buying, selling, hoarding, all while she remained their prisoner. The last thing Lena heard before losing consciousness was Chloe's voice, soft and sweet, mocking, a lullaby of cruelty. "Sweet dreams, Lena. Don't worry about us. We'll take care of everything for you." And when the darkness finally came, it felt like release. But Lena remembered everything. Every betrayal. Every strike. Every laugh. Every promise broken. And somewhere deep in the hollow of despair, a spark survived. It whispered, "This isn't the end. Not yet." The heat hit her like a hammer. Lena, or rather, the shell of her body left in Mark and Chloe's care, had no warning this time. The sun burned with a violence that was almost sentient. Her skin blistered before her mind even realized what was happening. The air was thick, heavy, trembling with distortion, so hot it seemed to twist the light around buildings into liquid waves. She struggled to lift her head from the rooftop where Mark and Chloe had abandoned her. The pain in her broken limbs screamed louder than her thoughts. Every movement was agony. Her lungs felt raw, each inhale a knife slicing through her chest. She tasted metal and ash. Mark and Chloe laughed down below. They weren't cruel because they needed to be, they were cruel because, in their minds, cruelty was survival. They had her money, her ticket, and the world was collapsing. What more could she hope for? "Move, loser," Chloe shouted up at her, the words sharp as shards of glass. "Not like you can do anything anyway." Evan, Mark, grinned, hands on his hips. "We're going to survive this. Thanks to us. Thanks to your ticket." The words hit harder than the heat. She had trusted them. Loved them. Shared her life, her dreams, her lottery win, and now, every ounce of that trust and affection was a weapon turned against her. Her body sagged against the rough surface. Her fingers dug into the concrete, fingernails splitting. She felt herself fading. The heat wrapped around her like chains. Her vision blurred. She thought of Chloe's laugh, Mark's calculating eyes. The betrayal of them both burned hotter than the sun. And then it happened. Pain exploded through her chest. Heat seared her mind. Her eyelids closed, heavy as stone. She felt herself tipping into darkness, the sound of her own ragged breathing fading into a distant hum. She expected death, as final and absolute as she had ever known. But death did not come. Instead, she felt a jolt. It was subtle at first, a whisper of wind in her mind, a ripple through the fabric of reality itself. And then clarity. She opened her eyes. The world was different. Familiar, but untouched by the apocalypse. The sun hung in a gentle sky, morning light soft on the edges of her bedroom. She was alive, whole, unbroken. Her body ached, but not from injury. From disbelief. The phone in her hand buzzed. Mark's number flashed across the screen. Her chest twisted, equal parts anger and fear. He was calling. She answered without thinking. "Hey, Lena," he said casually, voice still that same mix of charm and sly calculation she remembered. "How much did you win?" Her lips curled. For a moment, she wanted to tell the truth. To let him know, and watch the world shift beneath him. But no. Patience. Precision. The first lesson in this second life. 200 yuan, she said smoothly. There was a pause. A confused, disappointed pause. Then a laugh. "Oh, well. That's something, I guess." "Yes," she said. "Something." The phone went silent between them for a heartbeat. And in that heartbeat, Lena felt something she hadn't in years: control. She was alive. She remembered everything. Every betrayal, every strike, every moment of pain and humiliation. And now she could act. She dropped the phone onto the bed and ran her hands through her hair, a shiver running down her spine, not from the cold, not from fear, but from the enormity of what had just happened. She had been given a second chance. Not to beg, not to plead, not to trust blindly again, but to reshape everything. Her eyes fell on the lottery ticket still lying in the drawer. The paper felt heavier this time, laden not with possibility, but with responsibility. With revenge. With survival. She remembered the world outside, the heat, the fire, the collapse. The slow, unrelenting horror of an apocalypse fueled by greed and human carelessness. The image of Mark and Chloe, writhing under unbearable sun, haunted her mind. And she smiled faintly. Not for them. Not yet. But for her. This time, she would not be their victim. She would plan. She would prepare. And she would endure. Because she now knew something vital: the world could end, the people around her could betray her, and death could strike, yet here she was, returned. Whole. With all the memory of failure and suffering intact. She had been given fire once and survived it. And now she held it in her hands, tempered, ready. For the first time since the lottery, Lena felt a glimmer of something deeper than joy. It wasn't just relief. It wasn't just survival. It was purpose. Mark would never get another chance. Chloe would never get another smile at her expense. This time, she would dictate the rules. She sat on the edge of the bed, eyes narrowing, fingers clutching the ticket. The sunlight pooled over the floorboards like liquid gold, and for the first time she saw it clearly: she could outthink them, outmaneuver them, and endure what they could not. And she would. She exhaled slowly, letting the heat of remembered suffering fade into something cold and precise. The world outside was waiting, oblivious. The apocalypse she remembered, the disaster she had survived, would come again. But this time, she would be ready. And the first step, she decided, was simple: live. Not just survive. Not just hide. But live smarter, stronger, faster than anyone else. The phone buzzed again, Mark's name flashing. But Lena didn't pick it up. Not yet. She let it ring. Let it wait. Because now, the game was hers. And she intended to win. Lena sat on the edge of her bed, the morning light spilling in through the half-open blinds. Her hands trembled slightly as she held the lottery ticket in her lap, tracing the numbers again. 100 million. It was real. She remembered everything: Mark's eyes, Chloe's laughter, the searing sun, the unbearable weight of betrayal and pain. She exhaled slowly, letting the memories wash over her. She didn't feel relief, not yet. Not until the plan took shape in her mind. This time, she would do it differently. The first rule: no trust. No exceptions. Not in people who had already shown their true selves. Mark and Chloe were dangerous. Greedy. Calculating. And now, thanks to her rebirth, she knew them better than they knew themselves. The phone buzzed, breaking the silence. She reached for it, heart tightening. It was Mark. Hey. Lena? His voice carried the faint trace of optimism she remembered from the first life. About the lottery, how much did you win? She smiled faintly, controlled, letting a small shiver run down her spine. 200 yuan, she said smoothly. Just a little prize. There was a pause. Oh, well. That's something, I guess. Something, she agreed, letting her voice drip with casual warmth. She hung up, her hand lingering on the phone for a moment. A tiny thrill ran through her, he had no idea. Lena's gaze drifted to the room around her. Everything looked ordinary. Her apartment was untouched, just as it had been the day before. But she wasn't ordinary anymore. She was armed, with knowledge, with purpose, and with the gift of a second chance. She stood, stretched, and moved to the window. Outside, the city looked peaceful, oblivious to the storm she remembered would strike. Cars moved lazily along the streets. Birds flitted from tree to tree. People went about their routines. And yet, beneath the calm, she could see the threads of chaos waiting to unravel. Her first step was planning. She needed a sanctuary, a place no one could touch her, a fortress to withstand whatever came next. But it couldn't just be a physical space. It had to be her psychological armor as well, One that protected her from fear, from impulsive emotion, from mistakes. Mistakes had nearly killed her before. She wouldn't allow that again. She made a list. 1. Relocate somewhere safe. The city would become a furnace. She needed cool air, isolation, and control. 2. Fortify her new home. Walls, windows, insulation, backup systems, nothing left to chance. 3. Stockpile essentials. Water, food, medical supplies, survival gear. Enough to outlast the coming chaos. 4. Cut ties with the past. Mark and Chloe would think she was naive, small-minded, weak. Perfect. 5. Observe and anticipate. They were predictable. She had seen their greed, their selfishness, their inability to survive without others to exploit. She sat back down at the desk and began to map it all out. Every step. Every decision. Every possibility of betrayal or failure. She felt the old panic rising, the same suffocating fear she had felt when Mark's hand clamped over her mouth, but this time, it wasn't a trap. It was fuel. Hours passed. She made calls under the guise of errands and meetings, booked flights, researched remote locations, and contacted contractors discreetly. Her mind moved in patterns she hadn't known she could sustain for so long, contingency upon contingency, escape routes, secure storage for the ticket, surveillance plans, even backup plans for the backup plans. Her apartment phone rang again. Mark. She let it go to voicemail. His messages piled up, confusion, concern, mild frustration. Each one made her smirk. He had no idea she was already steps ahead. By nightfall, Lena had settled into a rhythm. She packed only what she could carry on to her first flight, leaving nothing that could betray her intentions. Her wallet contained the ticket, safely concealed in a coded compartment she had prepared, and enough cash to maintain appearances. Her small carry-on held essentials, identification, a few personal items, and the beginnings of supplies for the journey. She paused before leaving. For a moment, she let herself imagine her old life, the comfort, the friends she thought she could trust, the ease of believing the world was predictable. Her chest tightened. The grief and rage intertwined into a potent reminder: she had been robbed of more than money. She had been robbed of trust, safety, and dignity. And now she had the chance to reclaim all three. She leaned against the doorframe, glancing back at the apartment one last time. The city lights flickered softly in the evening haze. Somewhere below, Mark and Chloe were living as if nothing had happened, blissfully unaware of the storm she would unleash, not through brute force, but through careful, meticulous strategy. Lena pulled the door closed behind her and locked it, the click sounding like a small, victorious gunshot in the quiet hallway. The first flight took her north, to a cooler region she had scouted online, a place where the sun wouldn't become a weapon, where her mind could work without being numbed by fear or heat. She watched the landscape shrink beneath her as the plane climbed, and for the first time, she allowed herself a brief smile. She was alive. She was whole. And she had a plan. A plan that would outlast greed, betrayal, and the fire she had survived once. The rebirth had given her clarity, and clarity demanded action. As the plane touched down, Lena felt the first flicker of a strange, powerful certainty: this time, she would survive. And they would pay. Mark and Chloe had no idea what was coming. And she intended to make them remember. The north was cooler, but not forgiving. The sun was gentler here, softer on her skin, but Lena didn't lower her guard. She had learned that warmth could be as deadly as betrayal, and she wasn't taking any chances, not this time. She stepped off the small charter plane, the crisp mountain air filling her lungs. The scent of pine and earth was almost intoxicating after the choking city smog she had left behind. For a moment, she closed her eyes, letting it wash over her. But the moment was fleeting. She had a job to do, and time, she remembered, was never on anyone's side. The villa she had chosen was perched atop a ridge, secluded from the nearest road, hidden by trees that rose like silent sentinels. From a distance, it looked serene. Elegant. Almost like a vacation home someone might take lightly. But Lena saw it differently. She saw potential. She saw a fortress. The contractors she had hired arrived shortly after she did. She had spoken to them vaguely over calls, pretending the project was a creative retreat, a filming set for a documentary. That had been enough to explain unusual specifications: reinforced walls, bulletproof glass, dual basement levels. they didn't ask questions. No one did, because Lena had learned to speak only the truth that benefited her, or a carefully constructed lie. She walked the perimeter with a tape measure and blueprints in hand, mentally pacing the villa in ways no outsider could perceive. Every window had a plan: internal shutters, security sensors, triple-layered glass. Every door reinforced, every potential entrance accounted for. "Miss Lena, everything's on schedule," one of the contractors said, handing her a folder. She barely looked at him, her attention absorbed in imagining every scenario: an intruder, a fire, an earthquake, a panic-stricken person attempting to break in. Her mind ran through the possibilities at lightning speed. "Good," she said finally, her voice even, calm. "Check the backup generators. Make sure they're fully insulated. And the basement? I want it airtight, temperature controlled. No exposure." The men nodded. She didn't wait for thanks or acknowledgement. She walked inside and began examining the rooms herself, crawling into corners, checking locks, testing glass panes with a gentle tap. Each sound echoed differently than she expected. Each vibration told her a story. At night, when the crew had gone home, Lena stayed alone. She lit a candle in the corner of the living room, but the flame felt symbolic more than functional. The villa was already humming with life in its mechanical veins: ventilation systems, hidden climate controls, generators that would kick in if power failed. Still, she couldn't help checking, pacing, touching surfaces. It was as if leaving the villa for a moment meant leaving herself vulnerable. She imagined Mark and Chloe. The thought made her stomach tighten with controlled anger. This place, this fortress she was building, would be invisible to them. They would not find her. And when the apocalypse came, the fire she remembered so vividly, they would be the ones who suffered, unprepared, blind to her careful, deliberate preparation. Lena also prepared a smaller arsenal of security measures that weren't on any blueprint. Hidden cameras, trip sensors, and remote monitors. Each camera feed would flow back to a secure terminal, hidden behind a false wall in the villa's main study. If she watched, she could see every intruder, every greedy attempt to reach her, every misstep they made. Sleep came late and fitfully. Even in a room insulated from the chill, her mind would not quiet. She imagined scenarios that could go wrong: contractors turning traitor, small structural failures, her own miscalculations. And then she remembered something from her previous life: she had been careless once. She had trusted. She had hesitated. And that had cost her everything. She would not make that mistake again. During the day, she oversaw the work, pretending casual interest, asking a few technical questions, nodding thoughtfully. But beneath that mask, her mind ran simulations of every possible disaster. Would they try to follow her? Could they figure out where she had gone? Would they suspect her lies about the lottery win? Yes, they might. But they would not anticipate this. They could not. Not when she had rebuilt herself, body and mind, sharper than before. By the third day, the villa was nearing completion. Walls fortified, glass installed, basements sealed, climate-controlled rooms operational. She walked through the space slowly, absorbing the silence and the security. It was hers. Every inch of it. She paused in front of the master bedroom window, looking out at the valley below. The town was peaceful, unassuming, unaware that she had moved in and fortified her position. For the first time since the betrayal, Lena felt a flicker of something she hadn't felt in years: control. The villa would protect her, yes. But it was more than that. It was a statement. A warning, though unspoken. She would not be prey. She would not be helpless. And if Mark and Chloe thought they could find her, they would learn what she had learned about fire, about betrayal, and about the pain of underestimating someone who had already survived death. Night fell again, and Lena sat in the study, monitoring the villa's systems. Outside, the moonlight washed over the trees, peaceful and indifferent. Inside, she was alive, alert, and ready. Her pulse had settled to a steady rhythm. The fear of the past had not disappeared, but it had transformed. It had become fuel. She allowed herself one small indulgence: a glass of water, cool and crisp, ice clinking softly. She lifted it to her lips and drank slowly, savoring it in a way she never had before. Life was fragile, fleeting, and precious. And now, she had the chance to take it back on her terms. Tomorrow, she would begin the stockpiling. Tomorrow, she would complete the preparations. But tonight she would sit in her fortress and feel something that had been impossible in her first life: peace. Not comfort, not luxury, not joy, but calm. For the first time, Lena was untouchable. And the world outside could burn as it pleased. The villa's walls were complete. Her fortress was real, solid, and impenetrable. But Lena knew that walls alone did not make survival. Supplies, strategy, and foresight mattered just as much. She rose before dawn, the chill of the northern morning brushing against her skin, and began her preparations. The first step was stockpiling. She had learned, painfully, that in times of disaster, luck was fleeting. Only preparation could protect her. She rented a small truck under a false identity, packing it first with boxes of essentials she could carry herself: water purification systems, cans of high-protein food, medical supplies meticulously sorted and labeled. Every item had been chosen for utility, longevity, and portability. She drove through town in near silence, noting how ordinary everything looked: the baker sweeping his storefront, the children walking to school, the distant hum of traffic. To anyone else, life went on. But she remembered too well the chaos that would erupt once heat and desperation arrived. This calm was temporary, fragile, and deceptive. Her shopping lists were precise. Food that would not spoil, medicine that could treat anything from infection to broken bones, tools that could repair, fortify, or defend. She checked off every item with care, imagining Mark and Chloe in the streets behind her, frantic and unprepared, reaching for what she already controlled. By mid-afternoon, the villa's basement was a labyrinth of supplies. Shelves groaned under the weight of water bottles, canned goods, and medical kits. Hidden corners held emergency tools and weapons, not for attack, but for deterrence. Every room she inspected for security, every lock tested, every camera feed verified. Then came the calls. The first was Mark. He had a casual tone, masking irritation and curiosity. "Lena, you haven't been around. Is everything okay?" She could almost hear the unspoken accusations beneath his words. He worried, yes, but he also feared losing control, losing his advantage. "I've taken some time off," she said lightly. "Just needed a break. Some personal matters." Mark's voice shifted, skeptical now. "A week off? Leaving work like this? I thought you liked your job." "I do," she said, a faint edge of humor in her voice. "But sometimes life demands flexibility." He hesitated, then sighed. "I guess, okay. Just, be careful, all right?" She smiled faintly, feeling a rush of satisfaction. It was the perfect opportunity. She didn't need him anymore. Not the way he had been. "I will," she said. "Thanks, Mark. Goodbye." She hung up and blocked his number. The first tie to her past life was gone. A small, satisfying click in her chest. The second call came hours later. "Chloe." Her voice carried false concern, syrupy and insistent. "Lena? I've been trying to reach you. Are you okay? Did something happen?" Lena allowed a small pause before answering, letting the weight of the unanswered call stretch the tension. "I'm fine," she said finally. "I just needed to leave the city. Some personal matters." "Leave the city?" Chloe repeated. "But, what about your apartment? Your things? You can't just abandon everything." A small, calculating smile crept across Lena's face. "I left something behind," she said. "A little gift. A designer bag. You always liked it, didn't you?" She let the words linger. Chloe's sharp inhale carried through the line. She could almost hear the greed sparking to life. "Perfect. It's just sitting there," Lena continued. "All you have to do is take it. I won't be coming back." "Really?" Chloe asked, her tone trembling with desire and suspicion. "Yes," Lena said. "Really? You know me. I never lie about these things." When she hung up, Lena leaned back in her chair and allowed herself a brief smile. The trap was set. Chloe's greed would draw her in. And Mark would follow, inevitably. Both would step into the world she had prepared to watch from afar, powerless against the consequences of their choices. Even as she moved through the villa, checking her supplies and testing security systems, Lena felt a strange sense of calm. She remembered the panic, the pain, the betrayal. And yet, she was no longer the same woman. The fear that had once ruled her now fueled her. Every action, every decision, was precise, deliberate. She opened a box of medical supplies and ran her fingers over the neatly labeled packets. Bandages, antiseptics, antibiotics. Each item a small assertion of control over the chaos that would inevitably arrive. Outside, the wind rustled the pine trees. She could see the distant lights of the town below, oblivious, moving as if nothing would ever change. But she knew better. The world outside would crumble, and she would remain untouched. By evening, the villa was fully stocked. The basement held months' worth of food and water. Tools were stored and inventoried. Cameras were operational, motion sensors active, hidden panels sealed. Lena sat in the study, sipping a glass of water, the ice clinking softly. She allowed herself a single thought, I'm ready. And then she smiled, a small, fierce, controlled smile. Mark and Chloe thought they controlled her past, her money, her life. But she had reclaimed all of that. And now, she would watch. From this fortress, she would observe them stumble, struggle, and eventually destroy themselves, not through brute force, but by the consequences of their greed and arrogance. The villa was no longer just a home. It was a vantage point. A shield. A symbol. And tomorrow, the real game would begin. Lena sat in the dim glow of her villa's study, the hidden camera feeds flickering on the monitors before her. Each screen displayed a different angle of her old apartment in the city, silent, still, waiting. The air in the room smelled faintly of pine and wood polish, calm and comforting, a stark contrast to the chaos she remembered from her previous life. She allowed herself a moment to breathe. The villa was secure. Supplies were stacked meticulously. Every system was functional. She had built a fortress. But a fortress alone wasn't enough. This was about more than survival. This was about justice. Her mind turned to Chloe. She had called earlier, pretending concern. The warmth in Chloe's voice had been carefully practiced, too smooth, too deliberate. Lena had let her think she was still the same naive woman who trusted too easily. Chloe had bitten. Greed was predictable. Desire was predictable. And Lena had long ago learned to read both like a map. She picked up her phone and dialed a number she had blocked long ago. Mark. She listened to the line ring once, twice, 3 times before it went to voicemail. Good. He was restless. He would try again later. Lena leaned back, her gaze drifting to the monitors. There it was, the apartment, untouched since her abrupt departure. A designer bag sat innocuously near the window, an open invitation. She had left it there purposefully, knowing Chloe's obsession with status and material possessions would make it irresistible. She imagined Chloe's footsteps across the floorboards, the quick glance around the empty apartment, the greed sharpening with every moment. She imagined Mark following closely, his confidence faltering as he realized he had no control over what awaited them. It was time to put the final touches in place. Lena walked through the villa, checking the hidden cameras, testing motion sensors, and adjusting feeds to ensure she could see every angle. She double-checked the live connections, making sure there were no blind spots. This wasn't just about surveillance, it was about anticipating their behavior, manipulating it, and watching it unravel with precision. She paused at a small wooden table in the study and ran her fingers over the surface, feeling the grain beneath her fingertips. This table had witnessed planning, strategy, and calculation. It was the center of her rebirth. The place where fear had transformed into resolve. A shiver of anticipation ran through her. She had learned from the past, patience was power. Haste was death. Every detail mattered, from the placement of a bag to the timing of a phone call. She picked up the phone again and dialed Chloe, her voice soft and tentative, the perfect mask of vulnerability. Chloe, she said. It's me. I just wanted to let you know I've left the city for good. There was a pause on the other end. Lena could almost hear Chloe's internal calculation, the quick assessment of opportunity versus risk. You're gone? Chloe's voice was high-pitched, uncertain. Yes, Lena said, allowing a small catch in her voice, a faint tremor that wasn't really there. I needed a fresh start. Somewhere I could be alone, away from everything. Chloe's breathing shifted, the faintest edge of excitement. Lena smiled softly, imagining the wheels turning in her old friend's mind. And, Lena added lightly, I left something behind for you. A little gift. You always admired it, you remember the designer bag in my apartment? Oh, Chloe said. There was a pause, then a sharp inhale. You left it for me? Yes, Lena said. It's just sitting there, waiting for you. I'll never return to the city, Chloe. Consider it a parting gift. She hung up and let the silence settle over the villa. Perfect. The trap was set. Greed would do the rest. Chloe would go for the bag. Mark would follow, and their combined arrogance would seal their fate. Lena's pulse quickened, but her expression remained calm, controlled. This was not a moment for panic or anticipation, it was a moment for observation. She walked over to the cameras, ensuring feeds were clear, then sat back in her chair. Her mind wandered briefly to the events that had brought her here. The rooftop, the heat, the betrayal. She had been helpless once, a victim of trust and circumstance. Not anymore. Now she was the predator, and the prey were predictable, fragile, and blinded by their own desires. Hours passed. Lena monitored the feeds, making notes of minor details, the way Chloe's hand lingered near the bag, the way Mark's eyes darted nervously. She imagined them walking into the apartment, stepping unknowingly into her carefully orchestrated scenario. Every hesitation, every step, would play into her plan. And still, she felt a flicker of caution. She had learned the hard way that overconfidence was dangerous. Even the smartest plans could fail if one variable was overlooked. She walked the villa's halls, checking the security one more time, testing the cameras, making sure everything functioned as intended. By nightfall, Lena allowed herself a small smile. The trap was perfect. The villa secure. Supplies stacked. And soon, the city she had left behind would reveal the chaos she had anticipated. Greed, desire, arrogance, they were predictable. And she had learned, through pain and fire, how to exploit them. The first move had been made. The rest would follow naturally. And from the safety of her sanctuary, Lena would watch it all unfold. By 5 a.m., the sky had already taken on an eerie, molten hue. The first hints of the disaster she remembered were visible even from her mountaintop sanctuary, the air shimmered with heat, and the horizon blurred like waves of water over asphalt. Lena stood on the villa's balcony, arms folded, eyes scanning the distant town below. Everything looked calm. Deceptively calm. She could feel it in her bones, the world shifting. The early morning breeze carried the faint scent of ozone, sharp and acrid, as if the atmosphere itself were warning her. She glanced at the monitors showing her old apartment. Chloe had taken the bait. The designer bag sat untouched on the floor, perfectly in view, and yet the anticipation in Chloe's movements was palpable. Her fingers lingered over the handle, her eyes darting as if she expected a miracle to appear. Mark was there too, pacing nervously, checking the building's weak security cameras and muttering under his breath. Lena's lips curled into a faint, knowing smile. They were predictable. Both blinded by greed, both underestimating her. And outside, the world was beginning to crumble. Temperatures rose at a rate no one could have predicted, even with the previous disaster fresh in Lena's mind. Roads shimmered with heat, paint blistered, and distant sirens began to wail. Government warnings flashed across news channels, extreme heat alerts, dangerous UV levels, emergency advisories. But from the villa, Lena felt only cool, crisp air. The insulation worked perfectly. Air flowed through vents, filtered, controlled, perfect for survival. The contrast between her calm sanctuary and the chaos unfolding below was intoxicating. Through her monitors, she watched Mark and Chloe scramble to prepare. They argued over water, supplies, and escape plans, their voices rising in panic. Lena could see it, the first cracks in their alliance. Chloe wanted to leave, to abandon some of the supplies, while Mark insisted on hoarding everything. Their greed, their selfishness, now clashing with the reality of scarcity. She sipped her coffee, warm and fragrant, a luxury they could no longer imagine. She let herself savor the taste, the sound of the boiling water, the steam curling around her fingers. Each moment was a reminder of the life she had reclaimed, and the difference between her world and theirs. The temperature continued to climb. Heat waves shimmered across the roads, and the first signs of environmental collapse appeared, asphalt buckled, trees withered, windows fogged with the strain. Lena felt no panic, only meticulous awareness. Her sanctuary was impervious, but she remained alert. Every system was operational, but she checked them again anyway, as if repetition could prevent catastrophe. On her monitors, she saw Chloe finally approach the designer bag, hand trembling. Mark hovered behind her, eyes darting to the doorway, as if expecting someone to appear. Neither noticed the subtle traps Lena had set: pressure-sensitive alerts, silent cameras, hidden motion detectors. Every move they made was feeding into her knowledge. Every decision they made, misstep or hesitation, was a piece of the puzzle. And then, a sharp sound in the distance, the first sign of chaos spilling into the streets. Cars stalled, tires melting on asphalt, alarms ringing as systems failed. People ran, desperate and screaming. Lena's heart remained steady. She didn't gawk at the spectacle. She observed, calculated, recorded. She allowed herself a brief reflection. She remembered the terror, the helplessness, the suffocating heat of her first death. She remembered Mark's cruelty, Chloe's betrayal, the suffocating despair. But now, she had a vantage point no one else could imagine. She had control, insight, and the tools to ensure her survival. By mid-morning, conditions were deteriorating rapidly. Electricity flickered in distant buildings, water pressure dropped, and the first wave of acid rain began to fall, sizzling as it hit concrete and asphalt. Chloe and Mark's panic escalated. They tried to adjust, to strategize, but they were slow, uncoordinated, and ultimately predictable. Lena allowed herself a quiet, controlled exhale. The apocalypse had begun, but she was already ahead. Her mind ran simulations of their next moves: hoarding water, fighting over limited resources, searching for alternatives that didn't exist. Each scenario was a confirmation of her planning, a testament to her foresight. She moved to the study, checking her camera feeds again. Mark and Chloe were frantically reorganizing supplies, shouting over each other, every gesture broadcasting desperation. Lena watched, detached, yet deeply engaged, the thrill of control humming beneath her calm exterior. She didn't need to intervene. She didn't need to shout or threaten. They were unraveling perfectly on their own. The villa remained a haven. Cool air circulated, generators hummed steadily, water flowed, and shelves of food and medical supplies gleamed quietly in the basement. Every system was ready, every precaution in place. She felt a quiet satisfaction, not from cruelty, but from the knowledge that she had survived, and thrived, where others would fail. Outside, the world burned. And Lena watched it, poised, untouchable, ready for whatever came next. The apocalypse had arrived. And for the first time, Lena didn't fear it. She would endure. And they would not. By mid-morning, the city had become unrecognizable. The heat waves rippled over asphalt like molten air, distorting everything in their path. The faint morning breeze that had offered a moment of relief was gone, replaced by a suffocating heaviness. Streets shimmered, and the once familiar buildings now seemed alien, warped under the relentless sun. Lena watched all of it unfold from her villa, cool air washing over her in stark contrast to the disaster below. Mark and Chloe were trapped in the apartment, their earlier confidence evaporated as quickly as the water in their bottles. On her monitors, Lena saw them scramble in panic, throwing clothes, tools, and whatever they could find into bags, desperate to maintain a sense of control. But control was an illusion. The heat burned, electricity flickered, and the first signs of scarcity began to crush their composure. Chloe's voice was sharp, high-pitched, laced with frustration. "Mark. We don't have enough water for the both of us. Maybe we should, don't tell me what to do." Mark barked, slamming a hand against the table. His voice shook with panic and fear, a raw edge that he had never revealed before. "We plan this, or we die. That's it. Nothing else." Lena leaned back in her chair, sipping water that was still perfectly cool. The sound of ice clinking in her glass was almost musical against the chaos on the screens. She let herself smile, calm and controlled, her satisfaction quiet but deep. They had brought this on themselves. Every miscalculation, every greedy assumption, every choice to betray her had led to this moment. The first cracks in their alliance began to show. Chloe wanted to ration supplies, to be cautious. Mark wanted to hoard everything, to assert dominance. Arguments erupted, voices rising, echoing through the apartment, picked up perfectly by Lena's hidden cameras. "You're wasting time," Mark shouted. "If we don't grab the food first, it'll be gone. We'll starve." "I'm not stupid," Chloe snapped back. "We need water. We need to think. We can't just panic." Their panic was predictable. Their greed, their arrogance, their inability to coordinate, every flaw she had noted in her previous life, was playing out exactly as she had foreseen. And Lena watched, detached yet intensely focused, savoring the unfolding chaos. The city itself seemed to join in the torment. Power flickered and failed in erratic waves. Water pressure dropped to a trickle. Acid rain began to fall, sizzling as it struck the streets and rooftops, leaving tiny pockmarks on concrete. Chloe shrieked as a drop hit her arm, and Mark's hands flew to cover his face. Each natural disaster compounded their panic, each environmental obstacle magnifying their fear. Lena moved through her villa methodically, checking cameras, verifying climate controls, and ensuring every system functioned perfectly. She could hear the faint hum of air conditioning, the steady flow of filtered water, the reassuring click of generator backups, all the comforts and protections she had meticulously arranged. She felt a flicker of triumph, tempered only by a reminder, patience was still necessary. The trap had been set, but the final outcome would require restraint. On the screens, Mark and Chloe began to turn on each other in earnest. Chloe accused Mark of hoarding water unnecessarily, of thinking only of himself, of valuing the designer bag over their survival. Mark accused Chloe of being weak, of panicking at every turn, of undermining his authority. Each argument escalated, growing more personal, more bitter. Lena could almost hear the anger as it radiated from the apartment. The fear had evolved into hatred, sharp, biting, and completely consuming. They were unraveling faster than she had even anticipated. She let herself imagine the feeling of standing in the sun herself, burning like they were, and realized how far she had come. The woman who had been trapped, broken, and abandoned was now watching safely from above, prepared in ways they couldn't even fathom. Every decision they had made to betray her had become their undoing. Lena's phone buzzed. She didn't answer. She had no need to. They were already within her grasp. Their panic, their conflict, and their desperation were far more effective than any intervention she could provide. She allowed herself to step away from the screens for a moment, moving to the balcony. The mountains stretched before her, serene and impervious, a stark contrast to the crumbling city below. The wind was cool, carrying the scent of pine and earth, and she inhaled deeply. She was alive. Whole. Prepared. Untouchable. Below, Mark and Chloe's struggle intensified. They tore through cupboards, arguing over the last remaining bottles of water, each accusation sharper than the last. Chloe's hands shook as she counted the last of their supplies. Mark's face twisted with rage and exhaustion, sweat glistening on his brow. The heat, the scarcity, the betrayal, they were consumed by it entirely. Lena smiled faintly, a quiet, controlled expression. She had not moved a muscle to harm them, yet they were imploding, trapped by their own flaws. It was poetic, she thought, almost unbearably so. The same traits that had made them cruel, greedy, and successful in petty schemes were now their undoing. And she had front-row seats. She returned to the monitors, eyes narrowing as she watched the final moments of calm slip from their grasp. Every argument, every shout, every desperate decision was recorded, catalogued, and noted. She was learning from them still, observing, refining, understanding. Lena felt a flicker of something she hadn't felt in years, satisfaction. Not malice, not cruelty, but justice. They had believed they could take everything from her and escape unscathed. Now, they were helpless, trapped by the very qualities that had made them dangerous. She sipped her water again, the ice clinking softly. Outside, the wind stirred the trees, and the distant town shimmered under the oppressive heat. She was safe. She was prepared. She was alive. And Mark and Chloe were falling apart before her eyes, piece by piece, their desperation complete, their greed punished not by her hand but by the inevitability of their own folly. For Lena, this was not the end. It was only the beginning. The villa was quiet, serene, untouched by the chaos outside. The wind brushed gently against the reinforced windows, carrying the faint scent of pine and fresh snow from the mountaintop. Lena sat in the study, monitors glowing softly, showing every angle of her old apartment below. Every detail was visible, the sweat on Mark's brow, Chloe's trembling hands, the panic etched into their faces. She leaned back, swirling a glass of cool water in her hand, and let herself watch. Their desperation was intoxicating, not because she enjoyed cruelty, but because justice had finally caught up to them. Every moment of greed, every betrayal, every act of selfishness was culminating in this perfect storm, and she didn't have to lift a finger to make it happen. The phone rang, cutting through the silence like a sharp knife. Lena answered, her voice soft, even, perfectly controlled. Hello? Lena? Chloe's voice was high, frantic, trembling with fear. Please, please help us. The apartment, it's unbearable. The heat, the water, we can't manage. Lena's lips curved into a faint smile. I can hear everything, she said casually, letting the words settle. I know exactly what's happening in there. There was a pause, a sharp intake of breath from Chloe. You're watching us? Of course, Lena replied lightly, as if stating a simple fact. And I can see how clever you think you are, scrambling, hoarding, arguing. It's fascinating. Please, Chloe whispered, desperation creeping in. We'll do anything. Just, help us survive. Lena tilted her head, studying the monitors. Mark was shouting now, anger and fear tangled together, blaming Chloe for their predicament. She could almost hear his voice from the cameras, frantic and impotent. I'm afraid there's nothing I can do for you, Lena said. Her tone was calm, deliberate, almost soothing in contrast to their panic. I'm fully supplied. Comfortable. Safe. But you, she let the pause linger, watching Chloe flinch. You have made your choices. And now, you face the consequences. Chloe's sobs were muffled, panicked, but Mark's voice was growing louder, angrier. He banged on the walls, cursed, shouted, demanding to know where she was. Lena leaned forward, watching carefully as their alliance began to crumble under the combined weight of fear, heat, and scarcity. You see, she said, I have cool water. I have food, plenty of it. Ice. Medicine. And you have nothing but what you can scramble together, arguing, panicking, fighting. Chloe whimpered. We can't even find a way out. Please, Lena, you didn't think about consequences when you stole from me, Lena said softly, her words deliberate, each one calculated to wound as much as reveal. You didn't think about trust, or loyalty, or the harm you could cause. And now you're learning. The monitors flickered, showing them frantically searching cupboards, shoving shelves aside, spilling bottles of water. Every movement, every decision was flawed. Every argument between them magnified the tension, their alliance crumbling in real time. Lena's voice cut through the line again, sharper this time. Mark, Chloe, you're so predictable. You think greed will save you. You think panic will work in your favor. But it won't. Not this time. Mark shouted something unintelligible, and Chloe's voice rose in protest. Lena smiled faintly. Their desperation was exactly as she remembered, only more intense, more complete. The high-temperature disaster had amplified every flaw, every fear, every insecurity. I can see you fighting over the last scraps, Lena continued, her voice calm, almost taunting. I can hear every accusation. Every insult. And I can see how quickly your love for each other has evaporated under pressure. Isn't it fascinating? Mark banged his fists on the counter, enraged, unable to locate her. Chloe's hands trembled over the last bottle of water, eyes wide with fear. Lena's heart was steady, her calm a stark contrast to their unraveling. She hung up the phone and sipped her water, letting the sound of ice clink against glass echo in the quiet study. Outside, the sun rose higher, relentless, scorching everything beyond her fortress. She watched, detached but intensely focused, as their fight intensified. Mark shoved Chloe backward, shouting, panicked. She stumbled, knocking over a small cabinet, spilling the last of their supplies across the floor. He cursed, kicking at boxes, ripping through anything they had stashed. Chloe shrieked, desperately trying to save what little remained. And Lena watched, satisfied. She didn't revel in their suffering, it wasn't cruelty for its own sake. This was justice, born of careful planning, foresight, and survival. They had underestimated her once, betrayed her, stolen from her, left her for dead. Now, she observed the consequences of their choices, and every misstep, every fight, every panicked breath, reinforced her resolve. From her vantage point, the world outside could burn, collapse, and twist in chaos. Inside the villa, Lena remained untouched, protected, and in control. The psychological trap was working flawlessly. She didn't need to do more. They were unraveling exactly as she had foreseen. And soon, the final act would arrive. Soon, they would know the full extent of what they had lost. And when they did, she would be ready. The villa was quiet. Outside, the sun blazed over the scorched city, turning streets into rivers of heat that shimmered like molten glass. Lena sat in the study, a glass of iced water in her hand, the condensation dripping slowly onto the polished wood. The monitors flickered softly in the dim light, showing every inch of her old apartment, the arena where her enemies were crumbling under the consequences of their choices. Mark and Chloe were on the floor, exhausted, dehydrated, and panicked. Their arguments had degenerated into bitter accusations, anger mixing with fear, exhaustion, and regret. Lena watched them fumble over the last scraps of food, the meager bottles of water, and every petty possession they had hoarded. Their alliance had disintegrated completely, each blamed the other for their predicament, each decision more desperate than the last. Lena smiled faintly, her calm almost predatory. She had watched, waited, and prepared for this moment. They had stolen from her, betrayed her, abandoned her. Now, they were helpless, and she was untouchable. Her phone rang, and she answered smoothly, letting the silence stretch a beat longer than necessary. "Hello?" Mark's voice cracked with anger, exhaustion, and panic all at once. "Lena, we can't, we need help. Please, we'll do anything. You have to help us." Chloe's voice broke in, trembling. "Please, just, give us something. Water, food, anything." Lena's lips curved into a faint, controlled smile. She leaned back in her chair, swirling her iced water. "I can hear everything," she said, almost casually. "Every fight, every panic, every desperate choice. And it's fascinating." "Lena!" Mark shouted. "We'll give you anything. Just, help us survive." She shook her head slowly, letting the weight of her calm settle over the line. "I'm afraid there's nothing I can do for you. I'm fully supplied, comfortable, and safe." "And you," she let the pause stretch, enjoying the tension building. "You're reaping what you sowed." Chloe gasped. You're enjoying this?" "I'm not enjoying suffering," Lena said, her voice soft, precise, almost gentle. "I'm watching justice unfold. You chose greed over loyalty. You chose betrayal over friendship. You abandoned me. And now, you face the consequences." Mark slammed his hands on the floor, shouting incoherently. Chloe's tears streaked her face as she frantically searched for any escape. Lena let it all play out, every argument, every accusation, every desperate glance. They were unraveling exactly as she had envisioned. And then, she did something she had been waiting for, the final, crushing blow. She picked up the phone again. "One last thing," she said softly. "Something I didn't tell you before. Something I should have mentioned the first time we spoke about the lottery." Mark's voice rose, sharp and incredulous. "What are you talking about?" Lena's tone was almost conversational, casual. When I said I only won 200 yuan, she let the pause stretch, letting the disbelief build. "I lied." There was a stunned silence on the line, broken only by the faint sound of Chloe's strangled gasp. "I didn't win 200 yuan, Lena said, each word deliberate. "I won 100 million. The sound of the line going dead was almost anticlimactic, but Lena didn't need to hear them scream. She didn't need to watch them collapse. She already knew. The cameras had captured every frenzied, panicked gesture, every tear-streaked face, every desperate attempt to salvage what little they had left. They had been tricked. Outplayed. Their greed had led them straight into ruin, and Lena had orchestrated it perfectly. She placed the phone back on the desk, setting it down gently. Outside, the sun continued to scorch the city. The apocalypse raged as she had remembered. But inside the villa, Lena was cool, calm, and in control. She sipped her iced water, letting the chill run down her throat. She allowed herself a moment of satisfaction, not cruelty, not vengeance for its own sake, but the satisfaction of justice, of balance restored. She leaned back in her chair, looking out at the mountains, the forests, the wind rustling through the pines. The villa had become more than a fortress, it was a symbol. A monument to resilience, foresight, and the unassailable truth that those who betrayed her would suffer the consequences of their own choices. Lena's pulse was steady. Her heart was calm. Her mind, sharp and precise, catalogued every lesson learned, every mistake avoided. She had survived. She had thrived. And she had ensured that those who sought to harm her would pay, fully and completely. For the first time in years, she felt truly free. Mark and Chloe were gone from her life, Not by her hand, not by random chance, but by the inevitability of their own greed, their own cruelty, their own short-sightedness. And she was alive, whole, and untouchable. She allowed herself a quiet smile, letting the iced water clink softly against the glass. The villa hummed around her, secure and serene. Outside, the world burned and crumbled, but she remained untouched, the master of her own fate. Justice had been served. And Lena was finally free.